¿Te la vas a poner? Tengo muchas. Sí. Mía no es. No. Hello. Trina Fletcher. Nice to meet you. Igualmente. Nice to meet you. Listo, listo. Venga, a ella. Y, este sesión está en inglés, con poco, pero ya la gente sí, sí. Nuevamente, muy buenos días a todos y todas. Es un honor dar inicio a esta sesión del Summit Hemisférico sobre educación en ingeniería, un espacio que busca responder una pregunta fundamental. ¿Cómo construimos alianzas que trasciendan fronteras, conecten contextos diversos y preparen a nuestros futuros ingenieros para enfrentar los retos más urgentes de nuestra sociedad? La educación en ingeniería está cambiando rápidamente, impulsada por la inteligencia artificial, la globalización del conocimiento, nuevas economías de innovación y la necesidad de enfoques éticos, humanísticos e inclusivos. En este contexto, la CSEI nos convoca hoy para algo más grande que un panel, una conversación hemisférica de alto nivel para diseñar juntos el futuro de la educación en ingeniería en las Américas.
La coordinadora general es la doctora Reneta Garris O'Toole, presidenta de la CEI, vicerrectora de Excelencia Inclusiva. La primera sesión estará coordinada por la doctora Idalis Villanueva Alarcón, presidenta y profesora de Educación en Ingeniería en la Universidad de Florida. La sesión 2 será coordinada por el doctor Christopher Carr, asociado decano, y la sesión 3 por la decana Trina Fletcher de la Universidad de Arkansas. En esta sesión tendremos más de 20 líderes mundiales de la educación superior participando activamente, cuyas contribuciones escritas y perspectivas locales sirven como base para la conversación colaborativa que desarrollaremos hoy. Estos líderes han sido cuidadosamente articulados por nuestros 4 coordinadores, a quienes agradecemos profundamente por aceptar esta responsabilidad, por desplazarse hasta la hermosa ciudad de Cartagena y por liderar una iniciativa que marca un antes y un después para la CEI y LEIR. Su presencia aquí es un compromiso tangible con el avance de la educación en ingeniería en todo el hemisferio. Nuevamente, bienvenidos.
Rápidamente, si este panel va a estar en inglés, si requieren traducción, acá tenemos equipos al frente, por favor, si requieren traducción, aquí. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, muchísimas gracias. La ciudad es bonita y muchas gracias. Muy buenos días. A very good morning to all. Esta sesión está en inglés con poco español. La traducción para la audiencia está aquí. Good morning from Cartagena, Colombia. Universidad Tecnológica de Bolívar en Manga. Welcome. Bienvenidos to all in the audience here and to all viewing online via live stream on YouTube. Please feel free to chat, comment, and connect via the stream. Today, our segment is the Organization of American States Summit for Hemispheric Engineering Education Alliances, part of the Laird Conference of LOCSE, the Latin and Caribbean Consortium of Engineering Institutions. I am happy and honored to be the president of LOCSE this year, and I thank Dr. Maria Larondo Petri, executive director of LOCSE, Dr. Jose Texier, and the LOCSE team, and I also thank Ariane Quintel, the Organization of American States Executive Secretariat for Integral Development. Gracias, Ariane and OAS, for partnership and for allowing LOCSE to be a center of excellence in engineering. And now we will start our tracks, our alliances. You've already heard about our track leaders, and I will introduce them once again. Dr. Idalis Villanueva Alarcón, Chair and Professor of the Department of Engineering Education in the Herbert Wortham College of Engineering at the University of Florida. Dr. Christopher Carr, Associate Dean for Outreach, Student Success and Engagement at George Mason University in the Washington, D.C. area and Northern Virginia area, College of Engineering and Computing. And Dr. Trina Fletcher, Associate Dean, the School of Arts and Sciences, Associate Professor of Engineering and Industrial Technology and Management and Applied Engineering from the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff. And I am from the University of California, Davis, in the Inclusive Excellence Division as Vice Chancellor and also Adjunct Professor in Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of California, Davis. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to our track chairs. We will start with Dr. Villanueva.
Muy buenos días. ¿Cómo están? Bien, ok, eso me gusta escuchar los ruidos y los sonidos de nuestro lenguaje. Por el propósito de la sesión de hoy, voy a dar mucha de la charla en inglés, pero si tienen preguntas en español, en confianza, me la pueden hacer en español, la puedo traducir al inglés, no hay problema. Mi nombre es la doctora Idalis Villanueva Alarcón. Soy jefa de departamento y profesora del Departamento de Engineering Education en el Herbert Wertheim College of Engineering en la Universidad de Florida. Hoy yo voy a hablarles de la ética de la educación en la ingeniería. Es un tema que nosotros estamos muy conscientes como ingenieros, ya que nuestros roles profesionales envuelven muchas prácticas y principios éticos. Pero antes de comenzar, me gustaría hablar un poquito del departamento. Lo voy a empezar en español, pero lo voy a traducir al inglés y después, luego, toda la sesión que le sigue va a ser en inglés. Next slide. Mi presentación. La próxima. Y una más. Así. Nuestro departamento se enfoca en la educación de la ingeniería en las 3 etapas formativas del estudiante. Nos enfocamos primero en el proceso pedagógico. El proceso pedagógico es el proceso de enseñanza para niños de los grados kindergarten hasta el grado 12 en Estados Unidos. Sé que en Colombia es, creo que es el grado 11. Tenemos el proceso de andragogía, que es el proceso de aprendizaje del adulto. Estos son a nivel colegial, a nivel graduado, maestría, doctorado y profesional. Y el proceso que se conoce como heutagogy, que es el proceso de aprendizaje del individuo cuando es una persona profesional que está buscando aprender ciertas habilidades ya una vez que se ha retirado o una vez que esté en industria que quiera aprender unas nuevas habilidades. Just to transition very quickly, our department focuses in 3 pivotal stages of an engineering formation. The first one is pedagogy, which spans K through 12, andragogy, which is adult learning, primarily in the bachelor's, master's, and PhD levels, and heutagogy, which is self-directed learning, typically that happens in the professional as well as individuals who are retired who would like to upskill stages. So engineering education is inter, cross, and multidisciplinary, and it really spans the whole ecosystem of engineering, from kindergarten to gray. I would call it K through gray, so it rhymes in English. So if we go to the next slide, nuestro departamento se enfoca en 4 áreas y en 4 programas bien primordiales. La primera es en el proceso de evaluación de la efectividad de nuestro proceso de enseñanza. Cómo nosotros sabemos que los objetivos fueron construidos apropiadamente en el salón de clases y cómo nosotros sabemos que los estudiantes desarrollaron esa competencia. El próximo es personalized learning. Sí. ¿Qué necesito? Gracias. El próximo es personalized learning, el proceso de aprendizaje del individuo, cómo nosotros podemos asegurarnos de que la persona, gracias, que la persona realmente está aprendiendo. Si estás en un salón de 100 personas, como tú sabes que el estudiante número 50 aprendió igual que el número 92. El proceso de educación experiencial, cómo nosotros podemos desarrollar proyectos y actividades que realmente se alinean a los estándares industriales y de la vida real. Y también nos enfocamos en el workforce development, desarrollando los estudiantes con las habilidades actuales que se necesitan en este mercado. Por ejemplo, tenemos un programa de sistemas de inteligencia artificial, tenemos ciencias de data aplicada y otras áreas que son contemporáneas con el mercado de hoy. Just very briefly, we focus on 4 scopes: assessment, evaluation, personalized learning, experiential education, and workforce development. Each of them span in trying to understand what is the effectiveness of our teaching. How do we know that students are learning certain competencies? How do we make sure that a student who is in a classroom, student number 50 versus student number 92, is learning in the same way as we're instructing, making sure we give them experiences that are hands-on and applicable to industry standards, as well as workforce development, trying to teach students contemporary skills like AI systems and applied data science that's relevant to today's market. Ok, de este punto en adelante lo voy a decir en inglés para el tiempo, pero si tienen preguntas me lo pueden hacer en confianza. I'm just going to transition very quickly to English from this point forward, just for the interest of time. One of the things that we do in engineering education is that we help students critically think. So we teach them not just about the technical principles, but really helping them reflect and understand why they're learning what they're learning, and do they understand the significance of the terms. So we're going to start very quickly with a 2-minute activity, very short. But I noticed that when I teach students ethics, they often confuse ethics and morals. And so what I want to talk about today very quickly, and I want you to look at your neighbor and have a 2-minute discussion. What is the difference between ethics and morals? And how would you teach that to your student? And if you're online, please write in the chat as well. ¿Cuál es la diferencia entre la ética y la moral? ¿Y cómo tú le enseñas eso a sus estudiantes? Ese es el punto de discusión. All right. So hopefully you had a little bit of discussion around these terms. I want to open it to the people in the audience and also the people online. And I would encourage the people who's monitoring the chats to maybe share with me some of their responses. What is the difference between ethics and morals? Who would like to answer that first here? Yes. Okay, so ethics being moral, the moral rules that are subjective, is that right? Objective, and then moral is subjective, yeah. Mhm. So do you think that moral morals and ethics go hand in hand, or there's one that's an umbrella term and the other one that fits inside? Mhm. Okay. La ética en la moral vivida. La moral en la ética vivida, sí, correcto. Ujú. Right. And so, yeah, we're full of morals in life, right? Depending on the situation, the context, and what's going on. I'm gonna allow one more member of the group to answer this follow-up question to this is, so you know what the difference is. How do you teach it to this generation of students? So I'll let someone else answer that question. How do you teach moral and ethics to students today? Anyone in the back? How do you do that? What? Teaching it, right? Right. So there's something to be said about ethics not being on the sidelines, right? There's an importance of ethics being taught in the classroom and as part of the development of a student, right? How many times in our curriculum do we have ethics as part of our curriculum for engineering? Raise of hands, how many have it in their institutions? Just one. So how do you incorporate ethics in the curriculum for your institution? Yeah, so I'll repeat it for the benefit of those that didn't hear it. So you have a class called Professional Ethics that's part of the bachelor's of a student. But in addition, you have modules and pieces of ethics incorporated into the courses. It's amazing to me that only one out of the entire audience, and I don't know if there's members online who are saying the same.
I have some things online. Manuel Mendoza says la moral cambia dependiendo de la sociedad y la ética, no? And then Dr. Calvin Briggs says morals are personal beliefs versus ethics, which are principles established by a community. Dr. Ebony Lewis says make it practical, give real life examples.
Exactly. And so, this is just one of many definitions, but that kind of aligns with what some of the audience members said here and online. Ethics is a set of prescribed codes or principles governing conduct defined by external sources such as professional organizations or societal norms. Morality are personal beliefs and societal standards that guide individual actions, representing an internal sense of what is right and what is wrong, right? So what I did for this session is I asked a group of experts that I'll introduce to all of you around this topic. So this topic is, as AI and emerging technologies accelerate faster than policy can respond, how do we embed ethical reasoning and social responsibility into engineering education so that graduates instinctively consider the societal implications of their innovations, not as an afterthought, but as foundational to their practice? We had 5 experts who I included for today's track, and I will very briefly introduce them. Dr. Aitza Santiago, Chair and Professor of the Department of Engineering Sciences and Materials at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez. Joel Alejandro Mejia, Professor of the College of Engineering and Applied Science in the University of Miami. Kimberly Cook-Chenault, Associate Dean for Innovation in Engineering Education and Associate Professor of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at Rutgers University. Omeda Mercy, Associate Professor in Multidisciplinary Engineering Department at Texas A&M University. And I also decided to include a up-and-coming professional graduate student. Her name is Mary Ifuoma Nuawana, PhD student in Civil and Coastal Engineering at the University of Florida. So we have a diverse set of experts. All of them, by the way, have some formal training in engineering education, research, as well as practice. They have different walks of life. Some are chairs, some are deans, and I wanted to make sure that the student voice was present here. So as I asked them these questions, every one of them answered very differently. So if we start with Dr. Santiago, she is talking about her home institution. She said that at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, we embed ethical reasoning and social responsibility by integrating these principles across the curriculum through our Ethics Across the Curriculum initiative and the ongoing development of system-wide AI path frameworks, both aligned with real policy guidance such as the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI, the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, the AI Bill of Rights, and the NAIRR final report. As part of this effort, we are establishing AI learning hubs that will serve 11 University of Puerto Rico campuses and develop a new minor in AI education and engineering careers. So she has taken the information from what she has learned on best practices for AI and not just really thought about her curriculum, but really thought about it very structurally, right? How does it expand to other campuses? How do we make sure that these frameworks are embedded across multiple universities and multiple engineering initiatives? The next individual, Kimberly Cook-Chenault, had this to respond to. To prepare graduates for this reality, ethics must be embedded directly into all courses and more specifically into any course where students may use AI in technical workflows. Moreover, since the majority of students indicate that they use these tools daily across nearly all their courses, this could mean addressing how AI should and can be used ethically in all courses to some degree. Researchers in AI ethics increasingly emphasize the harms that arise from not only how our models are deployed, but from the design decisions that engineers make invisibly, such as choices in data labeling, data set construction, loss functions, evaluation metrics, model interpretability, and trade-offs between accuracy and fairness. Thus, ethical reasoning must become a habitual design practice. So she's really talking about mindsets and the importance of making sure that in our courses, we emphasize not just ethics as this is ethics and this is what it is, but this is how we should think of as engineers. So really thinking about engineering mindsets in the classroom. Dr. Joel Alejandro Mejia said, as AI systems evolve faster than regulatory frameworks can keep up pace, engineering education must shift from treating ethical concerns such as peripheral topics to positioning them as core design parameters. At the heart of this shift is critical literacy, the capacity for engineers to question, interpret, and interrogate the technologies they build, especially when those technologies operate in conditions of opacity, uncertainty, and limited transparency. I'll move forward just for the interest of time. Ultimately, it enables engineers to act not just as technical problem solvers, but as reflective practitioners. Again, really thinking about mindsets, really thinking about how do you teach them to reflect? It's not just sharing the information, it's really helping them deeply and conceptually understand what ethics is in everyday practices. They should be able to see it everywhere that they go. Dr. Mercy responded in the following way. As AI and emerging technologies outpace policy, we must stop treating ethics as an add-on and frame engineering itself as a moral, cultural, social, and political practice shaped by power, culture, and whose problems we choose to solve. We need to teach students to question the types of data they collect, who is left out of our models, whose knowledge is discounted, which communities bear the risk, and which cases efficiency is chosen over fairness. In other words, they must center the lived experiences in their processes and treat questions like who benefits, who is harmed, and who is missing from this design as basic technical requirements. How many times do we include ethics in the grading of our assignments or in the grading of our projects or even as part of a learning objective? How often do we do that? So really thinking about systematically incorporating that and then questioning who's left out when I do that design, when I do that experience, or what's the impact on people? I want to finalize by a graduate student who was very graceful in sharing this perspective. I think it's always important to center the students also in this communication and sharing their knowledge and expertise as well. As a graduate student, I believe ethical reasoning and social responsibility should be fully embedded in the engineering curriculum in ways that encourage active, experiential engagement with potential consequences of emerging technologies. Students learn best when they can visualize and analyze real-world technology failures, degradation, and risk by engaging in hands-on activities such as simulation, reflective exercises, and projects that reveal both the benefits and the potential harms of technologies like AI and robotics when misused. After all, experience is the best teacher. So what experiences are we sharing in the classroom that will help students understand what are those risks? Students don't know what the risks are because they haven't been exposed to that. So how do we expose them to risk? How do we expose them to failure? How do we expose them to understanding benefits and disadvantages of what they design? So I took all their comments and I wrapped it out into 5 recommendations and practices that we can all be thinking about in our classrooms. 1, embed intentionally ethics into foundational and experiential engineering courses. 2, frameworks and tools that are currently existing for AI programs can be used within our classrooms and the programs. 3, real-world AI context into the curriculum is essential, and it's really important. Ethical reflection as part of assessments in courses. So grading for reflective practices in ethics. And number 5, creating cultural AI habits of mind by transitioning ethics into moral reasoning. So we need to not just teach them the difference, but teach them that transition process as well. So I hope you found this to be very engaging and very thought-provoking. I really appreciate your time online and in person for your comments and your feedback. They're very valued. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Idales. Our next speaker is Dr. Christopher Carr, and as Dr. Carr comes, I want to mention online that Dr. Sunji Jangha said, in conversations with students, we found it necessary to talk about integrity, and to your point, they were conflating ethics and morality. And then I also share that our colleagues in the United Kingdom had a new book that has people from around the world. It's called Ethics in Engineering Education by Routledge Press. I wanted to share that as well. Dr. Carr.
Thank you very much. Hola and buenos dias. That about ends the extent of my un poquito español. It's like I will do my best to make sure that I speak as slowly as possible so that the translators, for those that are having it translated and for those that are online. So my name is, let's see. Maybe. Or we can just go to the next slide if somebody has power. It's like, I'm not particular. There we go. Okay. I'm Chris Carr, and I have the privilege of serving as the Associate Dean of Outreach, Student Success, and Engagement at George Mason. And so a lot of the work that I do really is framed from what do our students need? What are the opportunities for their development to participate ultimately in the development of society? I think my first example that I'll connect to is actually what I saw last night. So coming in here to the reception last night, and we had the band playing, and it was like after the band was, it was like the band leader kind of encouraged people to get out and start dancing, in the crowd. I realized that there is a perception of, of engineers as being very stiff, very removed, very antisocial. But the reality is that is very culturally contextual, right? It's like what we actually saw last night was joy and engagement and participation. And that comes from when we recognize that there are larger cultural concepts that we get to bring into engineering and computing education, but that only happens when we expose ourselves to the global insights that are available. So much like my colleague here, what I did was I went around and I asked some of my very, very smart friends, and I said, I have a question for you all. If we're trying to think about how do we educate students and prepare engineering and computing education to be considerate of the global insights that are out there, and the question was, how do we center designs that emerge from Caribbean, African, and Latin America? And what would it take for U.S. engineering education to genuinely position itself as a learner in global partnerships? And then what institutional barriers prevent us from doing so? So I'm very thankful to the folks who responded to my question. We have Dr. Dawood Hale, who is the interim provost and dean of the College of Engineering at Virginia State. He said that the catalyst is that we must move beyond the traditional capacity building paradigm, which too often begins with a deficit mindset about institutions in the global South. Instead, partnerships should be structured around mutual benefit, bidirectional learning, and shared problem solving, recognizing that innovation is context dependent and that communities facing the greatest constraints frequently generate the most creative solutions. We can't talk about the opportunities without also talking about what potential barriers there are in this work as well. He notes that rigid curricular structures that leave little space for immersive global learning, such as funding models that privilege US-led projects rather than collaborative ones, the promotion and tenure systems that undervalue community-engaged research, and risk management policies that discourage meaningful engagement with non-traditional or resource-limited environments. He noted that he did not want to sound too political, but it was important to acknowledge that the policy priorities of the current administration make it even more daunting, and if not necessarily impossible, to secure the resources needed to sustain global scale collaboration. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. We also had a comment from Dr. Deetra Trent, who served as the former executive director of the White House's initiative on historically Black colleges and universities. She specifically spoke from the context of what HBCUs could offer to global partnerships. She said, HBCUs bring something essential to AI and machine learning. They bring the human side. Social justice is core to their mission, so they naturally ask whose culture these systems reflect and whose communities bear the impact. Across the diaspora, people who have experienced subjugation understand how society's systems affect them. That perspective isn't taught, it's lived. This framing applies globally. institutions in the Caribbean, Latin America, and Africa bring contextual knowledge about how technology impacts communities historically excluded from designing these systems. Partnerships with HBCUs and the Global South institutions aren't charity. They're about building technology that works for everyone. The barriers that she brings up are that traditional AI machine learning have not captured aspects of our culture and that this gap is replicated globally. Just to test this theory, I asked ChatGPT about innovations in suspension bridges, and they gave a lot of really great topics, but none of them acknowledged that suspension bridges were first created from rope bridges created by indigenous communities in Chile. So the very foundation of bridges was not acknowledged in the ChatGPT as an algorithm about innovation in these very bridges. Embedding justice-centered perspectives comes naturally in the liberal arts, but integrating it into technical disciplines remains a challenge. U.S. institutions must be willing to dig deep, ask things like where are data centers located and who benefits and who bears the burden and whose knowledge counts as rigorous. Until we restructure funding models and institutional incentives to value this work, these partnerships will remain peripheral rather than transformative. I then tapped Dr. Carl Reed, former executive director of the National Society of Black Engineers, former VP and Chief Inclusion Officer at MIT, and current founder of the OAS group. He noted that the catalysts are shifts from capacity building to co-partnership, where institutions contribute distinctive strengths to achieve their outcomes, and that nobody can accomplish these things alone. He noted some examples from Northeastern University's Center for Climate Solutions that had a coalition of 15 global institutions that were facing climate impacts, and each was positioned as a contributor rather than a recipient. Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence offers another model of a global recruitment pipeline to cutting-edge, fully funded AI education that removed barriers for students worldwide. He then did note some of the barriers. That very coalition that he spoke about at Northeastern was a finalist, but ultimately not selected for their research collaboration to continue. But that comprehensive vision remains unrealized. Again, at the Mohammed bin Zayed University, is that he noted that they had invested in relationship building through initiatives like the counselor weekends, but they required sustained commitment from many US partners that they were unable to prioritize. Co-partnership demands governance structures, funding models, and institutional incentives that don't yet exist in most of our American institutions. I reached out to Ms. Chandrika Lamb, who is the executive director of the HBCU STEM Center. She noted that for U.S. engineering education to position itself as a learner in global partnerships, we must move towards models where expertise resides and where evidence and innovation actually occur. This requires redesigning curricula to incorporate other countries as partners and leaders rather than as beneficiaries. This means you have to incentivize collaborative research with Caribbean, African, and Latin American researchers and ground those partnerships in the resilience and innovation of indigenous cultures. This current shift in academic landscape actually provides us an opportunity for us to explore this transformation. She notes that the current barriers are similar to the ones previously noted, such as capacity building models, and that we have to dismantle our perceptions and come to things with some cultural humility. And that means restructuring monetary systems that position US as the leader. And it requires us to confront our deeply held assumptions of US-centric leadership, because these biases facilitate extractive partnerships. And until we address them directly, genuine collaboration will remain out of reach. Dr. Calvin Briggs, who is the executive director of the Southern Center for Broadening Participation in STEM, noted that these catalysts are the communities in the Caribbean, Africa, and Latin America, because they're not sites of intervention, they're sites of innovation. US institutions have to unlearn, listen, and adopt models tested under conditions of scarcity, climate volatility, and structural inequity. Caribbean innovation in climate resilient construction, decentralized energy, circular economies which should shape the ABET aligned learning outcomes in US programs. And positioning ourselves as learners isn't just ethical, it's strategic. And that the most urgent challenges are already being confronted daily in these very communities. Again, in some of the barriers, he noted the incentive structures that privilege Western theories, methodologies, and community-generated knowledge. That we don't have risk management policies that make things easy for us to share power, and that curricula and accreditation remain organized around Western canons, leaving little room for those in the global South. And that we assume that US partners must define the metrics, control the budgets, and own the outcomes, even when the Caribbean institutions are providing the most contextually grounded leadership. Finally, the comments came from Dr. Erin Lynch, who is the president of the Quality Education for Minorities Network. She noted that transformation requires reframing the colonizing perspectives in which so many colleges and universities operate. As we shift from deficit-minded to asset-based, human-centered approaches, we remove what is called the savior complex from how we design global partnerships. This means that we're able to center the expertise of Caribbean, African, and Latin American communities at the outset and not as afterthoughts. It also requires bringing more social scientists into engineering work. Scholars who understand power, culture, and history can help technical disciplines see what they've been trained to overlook. The barriers that she noted is that savior complex is deeply embedded into how the US institutions conceptualize international engagement. Helping rather than learning is the philosophy there. Building capacity rather than recognizing it. And that engineering education remains largely siloed from the social sciences, which means that cultural and historical dimensions of partnership design are often invisible to those very people who are structuring the collaborations. And until these engineering programs integrate those perspectives from anthropology, sociology, and post-colonial studies into their global engagement frameworks, we'll continue to replicate the same extractive models we claim to reject. So what did I note as the grand themes? The grand themes are that we need to shift from the deficit-based mindsets to asset-based paradigms. We need to recognize expertise where it exists. We should center the lived and cultural knowledge that exists in these communities. We need to create more models of co-partnership, redesign curricula and incentives, and use this moment as a strategic imperative to reframe the way that we think about international collaboration. In terms of the barriers, because again, we cannot acknowledge our opportunities without not acknowledging where our challenges lie, is the funding structures. Things like promotion and tenure and incentive systems do not value us doing this work outside of Western-based contexts. There's an opportunity for us to rethink how our research, education, and experiential learning models can engage in these ways and be rewarded in the academia process. Things like curriculum and accreditation constraints, as so many of us seek models such as those from ABET. How can we bring in cultural components? How can we bring in ethics and other areas into this as intentional and not as afterthoughts? Our risk management and governance policies, as many of our institutions were set up to support themselves and to enhance themselves rather than to support, enhance, and recognize others. Of course, things like our embedded assumptions and biases that show up not just in our day-to-day, but continue to be reiterated in things like algorithmic bias. And finally, in the political and policy environment that we find ourselves in today and likely tomorrow, how will we continue to work on bridge these things forward? I'll finally just see as the note for our pathways forward that is like, I think we need to reframe the partnership narrative. Caribbean and Latin American institutions have to enter partners as beneficiaries seeking capacity, should not enter as beneficiaries seeking capacity, but rather as co-equal contributors. And that narrative shift starts with how we describe ourselves. Oftentimes, I think that it was like, as US institutions, we come in with an idea that we need to help these institutions. We need to do more for these institutions, when the reality is that we could learn so much from these institutions. So how do we start to reframe the narrative? We have to build coalitions across the global South. That's part of what this alliances conversation is about here today, to ensure that we as US-led institutions are showing up as listeners, as participants, as thinkers, as researchers, and most importantly, as humble, engaged participants is like on the conversations. And so we have to encourage that our institutions don't just continue to wait for change, but instead be catalysts for it. We have to demand structural equity in our partnership agreements, looking at how we negotiate our memorandums of understanding and collaborative agreements, and insist on things like shared governance. And that until we are able to do this, we will have to recognize that these partnerships won't reflect equity, and that we have to use this moment of disruption to renegotiate terms that have historically favored these extractive models. Some of you have access to things that we no longer have access to in the United States and we've taken for granted. And now is maybe the time to point that out. And we also need to integrate our social scientists into engineering partnership design. I may be a little biased here as an interdisciplinary researcher myself, but I think that as we bring scholars who understand power, culture, and history into the design of these global collaborations, they're going to be able to help our technical disciplines see what they've been trained to overlook. I look forward to our discussion further, to hear what you all's perspectives are, so that we can take those back to our institutions and to our peers that are listening in online, and our partners that were able to contribute to this conversation. Thank you. I'll go ahead and I'll pass it forward to my colleague, Dr. Trina Fletcher.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Carr. And before Dr. Fletcher starts, I want to just connect to your last point about bringing scholars who understand power, culture, and history into the design of global collaborations. Yesterday, our keynote speaker, Lena, stand please, Lena. Yesterday, our keynote speaker also talked about social impact and connecting our technical knowledge to social impact and how that can really make a difference in the world. So all of these talks are all connected together. So thank you to our keynote speaker from yesterday, and thank you, Dr. Carr. Dr. Fletcher.
Excellent. Good afternoon. Buenos noches. Noches. Yes. Hello, everyone. I guess the slides will get up there in a minute. But I actually want to start out by sharing a story, because I think it's gonna connect what I'm about to share with you in a way that humanizes and really brings to light what's happening right now as it relates to the workforce, and just how critical it is for us to have more conversations about what's going on, but also to remind you of just how new this all is and how fast it's moving. So recently, at my institution, I've been back. This is the institution I graduated from undergrad. I've been back for about 7-8 months. And I have 2 undergraduate students, and we're working on an IRB, which is a document you've got to complete before you can do research with human subjects. And the study is actually looking at seniors, graduating seniors, and asking them about their undergraduate experience before ChatGPT, having ChatGPT, and now getting ready for the workforce. Because you think about it, it's a unique time to be able to collect that type of data. And these 2 students are actually seniors. So as we're working on the interview protocol, it actually made me think about my experience of when generative AI rolled out. At that time, I was an associate professor at Florida International University in Miami. I had been there for about 5 or 6 years. And at that time, I was finishing up 2 emergency federal grants centered around COVID. And I remember thinking, our university leaders are responding to generative AI like it's the global pandemic. We're trying to figure it out. What does this mean for students using it? How do we put policies in place? And it was fascinating to me how what's happening right now with AI in the workforce, it's almost like a critical moment that it's not a global emergency, but in a way, it kind of is. And there's certain people who are looking at it like that, and then certain folks who are not. And so I'm going to actually spend some time today kind of diving into that, showing you some data, and then giving you some, like a call to action of things we should think about. And some of the points that I'll make at the very end are really for the students. Because as a professor and as an administrator, I feel like the students have to be the folks that really push their institutions to start to make some of these changes. So on this slide right here, I want to highlight this quote because when I think about where we are right now and what's about to happen over the next decade, one of the shortest revolutions, if you want to call it a revolution, what's happening with AI. It's going to happen more quickly than any other revolution we've had in our history. The question for me is, who will benefit from this change versus who will be left behind? This thing is moving like a fast speed train, and it's going to be the have and the have-nots once we get through it. So there's a senator in the United States, and there's a video he actually did that just came out in October. So if you want to Google it, you'll find it. I highly recommend folks that are really interested in his perspective and his team's perspective on what's happening and the impact they believe it'll have. So focusing on the US for a second, they're expecting nearly 100 million jobs to be impacted over the next decade. One thing that's big in the news right now are the companies who are benefiting from AI, and it's very quiet. Amazon, Walmart, the healthcare system. I was reading an article the other day where we shut down a level 1 hospital in the US, in the Philadelphia area, which is unheard of. You rarely hear about a level 1 trauma hospital with a cancer center shutting down. They're saying underneath it all is really AI. The technology is allowing these companies to just, remove jobs, release people that historically we had never seen. There have been talks in the past of it'll only be clerical jobs. It'll only be law firms because you won't have to analyze certain data. They're now being able to prove that it's going to be much more job sectors, a higher number of different type of job sectors that will be impacted by AI versus what we had initially thought. And this is what I was talking about with the pace. It's happening so fast that researchers can't even keep up with what's happening and what to expect. On a global level, and this is clearly relevant for where we are right now, there's more statistics that align with what we're seeing in the US, right? And here we see that 40% of jobs worldwide will be impacted, 60% of jobs in advanced economies, 42% of businesses tasked to be automated by 2027, so less than 2 years. And then 80% of tasks in some roles affected by generative AI. And I have to remind people, we're talking about generative AI. That's not, do we have any computer scientists in the room? Anybody with computer science background? If you've heard of machine learning, NLP, natural language processing, when you start to talk about robots, that's separate in some ways from generative AI. So that's why we're seeing more markets that are going to be impacted than what we initially thought when you just focused on that particular area. And then when you talk about the gender impact and then the wealth gap, those are two key areas that they're paying close attention to because they're saying more populations than others are going to be impacted in more negative ways. And this slide right here, I was really just trying to emphasize the quickness of this all. So generative AI comes out, universities are trying to wrap their heads around it. How many of you heard that this was the first technology where they reached 100 million users in less than 2 months? There was no other technology that had been used that fast. No app, no cell phone, the laptop, no nothing. This is the fastest form of technology being used by everyday people. And I think the Pew Research Center showed that it was even quicker after the first year, once people start to learn about it. And they talked about more people using it for therapy, more people using it for day-to-day things versus like DIY projects on their homes, which is another area of concern for policymakers. And then I've got more information around, once they kind of saw the direction things were going, some sad cases around the use of AI, students committing suicide, some other random things going on with AI that you can Google or get on YouTube and find out. But now you're starting to see the executive orders come out to say, wait a minute, we need to get this under control. And in the US, we've seen some executive orders come out. We have new leadership now, new administration, so that's changing a little bit, but on a global level, we're seeing more people get involved. I think Australia was the latest country where they now have banned anyone under 16 from being able to use any social media platforms, right? And a lot of that is how AI is being used from an attention economy standpoint to drive, increasing usage of the apps. So one thing that everyone has shared, and I have a quote here from a former president of one of our universities in the United States, Texas State University, Dr. Alicia Crumpton-Young, who is actually an engineer, full tenure professor in higher education before she transitioned over to the National Science Foundation, which is one of our largest funders of research in the United States. She mentioned that it is critical for institutions to prepare students for the careers of tomorrow and not simply the jobs of today. And this is why I made the comment around our students, because all of our students who are in universities around the world, you are the ones that are going to be impacted by whether or not your university is preparing you for what's about to come. And if you think about it, it's really industry and higher education that's in a position to help you all get prepared, right? So I mentioned the two key takeaways. The first one is we have to make sure, thanks, Chris. The first one is we have to make sure that we're teaching engineering students to be critical AI thinkers and effective users of the technology. And here I had engineers and not just engineering students, because this is also the same for the engineers that are already out in industry who are now being tasked with using this technology as well, right? I have these guiding questions here to help us all kind of think about what does this even mean? So ask yourself, what is my university doing right now when it comes to AI training and education? On my campus, I'm holding our career services office accountable for reaching out to the companies and saying, what do our students need to know in order to get a job at your company this summer for an internship or next summer once they graduate? Because if the universities are not asking the questions, then how do you actually get the information? And maybe I'll pause for a second and pose a question to the room, and maybe somebody can help me understand this. At your universities, what conversations are taking place right now to make sure you all are ready for your jobs and the AI requirements that come with it? Has anybody's campus had conversations around this that you know of? And see, this is becoming a common theme of whose job is it to make sure that our students are prepared, right? When it comes to AI in particular, because the technology is advancing so much, and again, we talk a lot about generative AI, but there are so many other tools involved from an engineering and robotics standpoint, for example, in manufacturing, that's not being discussed at all. So if career services is not asking industry and we're not getting that information, then as a faculty member, how am I supposed to know how to change my syllabi to fit what the students need? That's the point that I'm trying to make here. And then I think the last bullet is an important bullet for any faculty members or anyone that has a position of power. I know there's some people in the room on campuses. Every engineering program in the world should treat AI literacy and critical evaluation of the AI that you're teaching the students in the classrooms as a core competency, just like calculus and thermodynamics. I remember back when I was in high school, we had to take a keyboarding class. We sound old now. We had to learn how to type. We had to, we had to learn the language. Then it was like everybody had to learn how to code. And now we're in a situation where everybody really needs to understand the fundamentals of AI in order to be able to acclimate to this workforce. And then the second takeaway that I want to point out is, and I know some of our panelists actually hit on this multi-stakeholder governance linking classrooms, companies, and communities. In the US, we talk a lot about the broken relationship between K-12 education, higher education, industry, and then some people throw nonprofits in there because they kind of work with a lot of the groups. This is kind of the same thing. And some guiding questions I would leave you all with as you go back and talk to the leaders on your campus or have these conversations amongst yourself are, what structures or agreements need to exist so that companies share emerging skills needs transparently and educators can adapt their curricula quickly enough to match the pace of the AI-driven change. So that's a way to word the question to help those key leaders on your campus and in your communities understand that. The second question is, how do we ensure that students, educators, employers, and community members all have a real voice and not just a seat at the table when it comes to decision-making, situations around these decisions? So what that would look like on a campus is if the president or the chancellor says, hey, we need to talk about AI, from cheating to job preparation, we need to talk about it. And so they say, okay, we're gonna have 2 students in the room, but they have several meetings and the students are not speaking up. They don't have a voice. Their input is not being put into the final report that's shared across the campus. That's what I mean by that. And then the last question is, how do we guarantee that AI-related workforce programs prioritize historically underserved communities so that talent development doesn't reinforce existing inequities, but actively reduces them? We're already seeing the implications of this. We're already seeing it. One of the latest articles I read was around how Amazon would have a number of jobs annually that they will post that people could apply for. It's already been cut in half. And it's like a quiet decline that you don't see, right? Because you only see the jobs that are added to LinkedIn. You don't realize, oh, this is only half of the jobs that they had last year. And a lot of the jobs that they have, especially where they have distribution centers, were primarily historically underrepresented individuals applying for those jobs. So that's the last that I have on here, but I want to kind of leave you with those questions as we go into the panel discussion with the time we have left. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fletcher. Did you have any questions that you wanted to pose between the panel before we get to the next track, Dr. Carr? Or if not, it's okay. We can.
Well, because I definitely want to save as much time for folks from the audience to bring this in. But I think one of the things that I'm hearing as a uniting theme for us is that we're in a transformative moment in time, right? Is like, so whether we look at it from the AI standpoint, is it whether we look at it from policy implications potentially changing, how do we look at it from the opportunity for us to think about classroom engagement with things like, ethics being a part of who we are and not is like the afterthought conversation. So my question for my fellow panelists is like, what does capitalization of the moment look like? And how do we turn that moment into a potential movement?
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. So we have now had the first 3 tracks of ethics in engineering. We talked about ethics and morality. We talked about global leadership programs and making sure that there's capacity building and recognizing the contributions of different cultures, of the Caribbean, of Latin America, and then AI and the importance of AI and how we need to be learning it and teaching it in a good way. And so now we're going to go to track 4. And track 4 is about different kinds of frameworks. I'd like to start talking about two frameworks that my university uses in California. I'm at the University of California, Davis, and the first one is here on the left. I am the Vice Chancellor for the Office or Division of Inclusive Excellence. And the framework that we use has 4 pillars: to engage people, to equip them, to empower them, and then to elevate them. We used to call this the 4 E's: engage, equip, empower, and elevate. And that has served us very well as we've worked across campus, as we have shared things like our principles of community and different kinds of opportunities and so forth. I also share the next level core community values from our College of Engineering. Our Dean of Engineering at the University of California, Davis is Dr. Rich Corsi. And the team for Next Level Engineering has looked at these aspects that they're teaching in engineering as part of their next level strategic vision: respect, kindness, appreciation, transparency and openness, and collaboration. And they have felt that within engineering, it's important to have these core values. And so I'm happy to share that from our College of Engineering. The next thing that I want to share is some models, some mentorship models that were part of a National Academies of Science and Engineering book called The Science of Effective Mentoring in STEM. Oh, thank you. Thank you. There was a commissioned paper called Mentoring Beyond Hierarchies, Multi-Mentor Systems and Models by Baranda Montgomery and Stephanie Page. This was in 2019. And they said, usually when you have a mentor relationship, there's a mentor and a mentee, just a one-to-one model. But you can also have triads or threes where you have a mentor and a mentee and another mentor, or you can have one mentor and 2 mentees, a triad or 3-part model. You can also have a collective or a group model where you have mentors and then a collection of mentees. The one that I want to really focus on is the 4th one, the network model, where you can have a mentee or something that is in the center, and then you have offshoots where you're connected to a mentor, or there's a mentor node, there's a resource, and that resource node might be an organization like LOCSE. There might be a mentor and more than one mentor. So you can have a variety of mentors, you can have a variety of organizations that you're connected to, and you can have this multi-mentorship model. This can also work for alliances. And so if you take this same framework and use it with alliances, I'm using in this kind of framework in my own institution as we connect and partner with different kinds of organizations. So in the center, we have the Inclusive Excellence. Then we have Avanza, which is our Hispanic Serving Institution initiative. We have Campos, which is the Center for the Advancement of Multicultural Perspectives on Science, and then the Promise Engineering Institute, which is sponsored by the National Science Foundation, and it's for graduate students. There are all kinds of networks or frameworks or alliances that can be connected to this. We could connect each of our universities now to LOCSE. And LOCSE, for example, could be in the middle. and it's connected to UC Davis, the University of Florida, George Mason University, the University of Arkansas, our universities from Costa Rica, our universities from Peru, our universities from Mexico, our universities from Colombia, universities from Chile, etc. All over Latin America, universities of the West Indies, universities of Honduras, universities that are all over the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, etc. So we can use this kind of model to think about a center or a centroid, and there are other kinds of models that we can consider as well. And now I would like to share that we're going to have some guests online to talk about their work in some of these models. The Center for the Advancement of Multicultural Perspectives, or CAMPOS, the Promise Engineering Institute, which is an East-West alliance between UC Davis and UMBC, which is in Maryland in the United States. And I know that Dr. Sunji Jangha from UMBC was online. From UC Davis, Avanza. And then we have, we're going to talk a little bit about the University of California, Alianza Mexico Ecosur model that has UC Davis, UCLA, El Colegio de la Frontera Sur, the Comisión Nacional Forestal, Parque Nacional Lagunas de Montebello, and Colectivo Los Sin Fuego. Our guests are going to be Jenna Marie Enzuna, who is the PhD student in chemical engineering and also in the Promise Engineering Institute. Dr. Ebony Lewis, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for Inclusive Excellence and a co-principal investigator for the Promise Engineering Institute. Dr. Veronica Martinez Cerdeno, who is a professor of pathology and laboratory medicine, but also the director of Campos. Dr. Jesus Velasquez, who's an associate professor of chemistry, but also faculty in chemical engineering. He's also an Avanza faculty fellow and a Campos alumnus, so he encompasses all of these different groups. And then Dr. Jeanette Cobian, who's the assistant director of mechanical engineering, and she's a Campos scholar, but also a UC Alianza researcher. And if they're online now, we can switch to them online, and I will let them speak next. If our speakers are online, okay, they are online, and we can pin them online, and we can reduce us so that our speakers can be seen by all. Okay, we can make the gallery, okay. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you to our speakers for joining us from California and joining us here in Cartagena. And let's go ahead and get started. You all have the floor.
Thank you. Am I up next? I apologize. I think am I the next?
Yes, please go
Okay.
ahead. The panel, your panel is now starting, so please go right ahead.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, or hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Ebony Lewis. I serve as the Chief Strategy Officer in Inclusive Excellence at the University of California, Davis, and am one of the co-PIs with our Promise Engineering Institute. And it's an honor to be here, and it was wonderful to hear all of the presentations that have been shared so far. It really resonates with all that we have been doing with our Promise Engineering Institute, which is an NSF-funded initiative designed to broaden participation in engineering faculty by providing targeted interventions for doctoral students. And so in Promise, the Promise was established as a distinctive bi-coastal partnership between our institutions in Maryland and California to deliver programming specifically tailored to graduate students in engineering, really motivated around the observations that many engineering doctoral students, even those participating in other broadening participation initiatives, were opting out of academic career trajectories. And so the focus has really been to cultivate a robust network of support for doctoral engineering students, and also simultaneously facilitating introductions of these students to faculty and higher education leaders to really showcase and inspire diverse doctoral talent. PI was launched in 2017 at the University of Maryland with sponsorship from NSF. And in 2019, the project was reimagined as a West Coast, East Coast partnership when our PI, Dr. Toll, came to UC Davis and transitioned to leadership there. Our current stage we have our Promise Engineering Institute Mentor Academy, which I've had the privilege of engaging with over the last couple of years as a co-PI. And this is part of NSF's Broadening Participation in Engineering Track 2 program. And the focus is really on intergenerational mentorship, aimed to develop future academic leaders by training engineering PhD students in core skills related to engineering excellence and leadership. So there's two key goals with that, and it's designing and piloting a leadership model for doctoral engineering scholars, emphasizing skill building, networking, and community, and then also expanding the mentorship and engineering models with proven success. And one of the key ways to do that was adding a new component, which is one-on-one mentoring with current and former university presidents who are also engineers. And then mentees, in turn, they're expected to serve as mentors to nurture the next generation and grow the pool of leaders. Our project has a hybrid model, so there's engagement. Some of the things we learned from COVID in person and also virtual. And some of the key program activities include a 3-day in-person mentoring conference, ongoing virtual engagement with mentor presidents, networking sessions at national engineering conferences, and a 2-day workshop focused on higher education, academic, and career success. We've also expanded our West Coast participation to include our fellows from UC Riverside and Stanford, and some of our fellows have even launched their own efforts, such as our Aggie Resilience Program, inspired by their participation in engineering. I'm very excited that you will be able to hear from one of our fellows and her faculty, who's also a mentor. And so at this time, I believe I am going to hand it off to Dr. Martinez Cerdeño, and please take it away.
Sí, muchas gracias, Ebony. Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Verónica Martínez Cerdeño y soy profesora en la Universidad de California Davis y también soy la directora de Campos. Campos es el Centro para el Avance de las Perspectivas Multiculturales en Ciencia y tiene varias funciones dentro de la universidad. La primera es el reclutamiento y la retención de profesores con perfiles de excelencia en STEM y con un compromiso marcado con la diversidad y la inclusión. También otra de las funciones de Campos es la mentoría y el apoyo profesional y desarrollo de la carrera de nuestros profesores, con especial atención a los méritos y promociones dentro de la universidad. Otra cosa a la que nos dedicamos es a incrementar la visibilidad y la representación de nuestros profesores mediante ceremonias de inducción, coloquios, actividades de difusión y participación en redes académicas. Y por último, tenemos como función la creación de una comunidad diversa en STEM, fomentando un ambiente inclusivo con investigación, enseñanza y mentoría que reflejen las perspectivas multiculturales. Tenemos una serie de profesores, que en estos momentos son 54 profesores formando parte de Campos. Todos ellos empezaron como profesores asistentes y ya están en otros niveles como profesores asociados y full professors. Y hoy es un honor para mí presentarles a uno de ellos. Su nombre es Jesús Velázquez, que es un profesor asociado de química y además es uno de nuestros académicos Campos, que a su vez les va a presentar a uno de sus estudiantes que nos va a hablar sobre su investigación. Así que adelante, Jesús, bienvenido.
Gracias a todos por la oportunidad. Estoy extremadamente emocionado por tener la dicha de compartir un poco de lo que nosotros hacemos aquí en el Departamento de Química en la Universidad de California. Pero como Dr. Renera Toll les explicó, yo tengo este beneficio de que mi laboratorio forma epicentro para poder prácticamente enaltecer los programas de campus a nivel de faculty y también el programa de Promise a nivel de apoyar a nuestros estudiantes. Pues la visión de nuestro laboratorio para poder hacer esto, necesitamos una ciencia específica que atraiga a los estudiantes. Esta ciencia que nosotros hacemos lo que busca es diseñar catalizadores para energía renovable, pero también queremos utilizar esta excusa para desarrollar la próxima generación de científicos. En cuestión a la ciencia específica que nosotros hacemos y la cual vas a escuchar ya mismo de mi estudiante, queremos transformar el aire que tú respiras, el agua que tú bebes y utilizar la energía del sol para poder crear cosas como combustibles, plástico y hasta cemento. En adición, en paralelo, no tan solo queremos hacer la ciencia atractiva, pero sino también queremos crear colaboraciones, programas que ayuden a desarrollar la próxima generación de estudiantes subgraduados y también estudiantes a nivel doctoral. Lo hacemos por medio de campus, por medio de Promise y muchos otros programas que estamos colaborando y también diseñando. So today, I have the great fortune of actually presenting you the real superhero here behind, the science that we do. So this superhero is Jenna Nzunza. She is a PhD candidate in my laboratory, and she's done exceptional work in designing these catalysts that I'm talking to you about that are capable of hopefully improving technological innovations in renewable energy. We are extremely fortunate that we share the same vision behind the impactful science that we do, but also uplifting the next generation. So you will hear all about it from Jenna. So Jenna, whenever you have time, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Jesus, for such a beautiful introduction. I will be switching gears here to discuss a little bit about the work that I do in Dr. Jesus Velasquez's lab. So I'll be presenting on designing catalysts for reactive capture of carbon dioxide. Again, my name is Jenna Marie Nzunza. I am a Promise Engineering Institute PEI graduate scholar. Being a part of PEI has transformed how I see myself as a first-generation engineering student. I'm thankful for this program, which has helped me build a very supportive network and gain professional development tools to navigate graduate education. It has definitely strengthened my commitment to pursue a graduate degree to design chemical systems that will electrify chemical commodities. Now, our reliance on fossil fuels has increased CO2 into our atmosphere since about the 1800s. We see that coal, oil, and gas make up the largest amount of global emissions. As a chemical engineer, I have to ask, how can we use CO2, which is an excessive pollutant in our atmosphere, as a fundamental feedstock in industrial processes? Now, one technology that has emerged in the past 2 decades is known as electrochemical CO2 reduction. This is a multi-step process where we take point sources of CO2, such as industrial plants or atmospheric CO2. This CO2 must be captured, go through a multi-step process in order to be sent to an electrolyzer, where it can make valuable products such as formate, CO, and alcohols. This reaction is facilitated through electricity that is made from renewable energy. Because this is a multi-step process, it is energy intensive with higher operational costs. But what if we can think of a world of where we can create a circular carbon economy? And this would improve efficiency and maybe reduce the overall energy requirements as stated before. This would be integrating CO2 capture and electrochemical conversion into one, and it takes a multi-step process down to a one-step. The idea is the same, in which we have a CO2 source, which is captured CO2. This captured CO2 is fed directly into an electrolyzer, which it can then make the same valuable products as stated in the previous slide. Now, my research aim is, can we identify unique catalyst considerations for using this captured form of CO2 as a feedstock? My approach was to first benchmark pure metal catalysts for reactive capture in amines. We chose pure metal catalysts as our starting point because they are exemplar catalysts for many electrochemical processes. As you can see, the table on the left is showing selectivity for the 2 products which I mentioned earlier, CO and formate, which are very valuable. As a side reaction, a part of this reaction is hydrogen, and you can see an increase in this side reaction. This is an undesired side reaction. And so as engineers and chemists, we thought, how can we modify the surface of our catalyst in order to improve these numbers? After a few iterations, we came to what is known as a nitrogen-doped carbon catalyst. These are also used commonly in different electrochemical processes. And from the bar graph on the right, you can see an increase in the selectivity of CO over time, which is about 17%. While that may not seem like a lot compared to 4.8%, this is one of the highest selectivities known in literature when using a heterogeneous catalyst in reactive capture conditions with amines. And for future directions for this field, what modifications to catalysts can be implemented to improve selectivity? So can we go from 10 to 17% to 90 or even 100? And also, how does the speciation or the chemical species in the reactor affect the chemistry happening? And how do real capture solutions with toxic impurities also affect activity? These are things like sulfides and nitrides that are coming off of industrial processes used as captured CO2. And with that, I would like to thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. Jesus Velasquez, my advisor, as well as Dr. Renetta Toll and Ebony Lewis for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
And next we have Dr. Jeanette Cobian. Thank you for being here. Dr. Cobian.
Buenos días a todos. Compartiré mi pantalla. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Janet Cobian Íñiguez. Soy profesora asistente en la Facultad de Ingeniería Mecánica en la Universidad de California Davis. También soy Campus Scholar y también soy investigadora principal de un proyecto nuevo con fondos del programa Alianza de la Universidad de California, del que estaré hablando el día de hoy. Bueno, para iniciar mi pequeña intervención, quería compartir un poco sobre el trabajo que yo hago y dentro del contexto global. Muchos de ustedes tal vez están familiarizados con los incendios forestales que tenemos en el estado de California, en Estados Unidos, en el cual en este año 2025 tuvimos unos enormes incendios en Los Ángeles en enero de este año. Y estos tipos de incendios son los que usualmente llamamos los incendios destructivos, o en inglés se llaman bad fire. Este tipo de incendios este año, el 2025, existieron no tan solo en California, pero también en países como España, Bolivia y Brasil. Entonces, este fenómeno de incendios que cruzan esas fronteras de los equilibrios ecológicos se convierte en una realidad en nuestro planeta. Entonces, esa es la imagen que usualmente tenemos sobre los incendios. Sin embargo, también existe lo que llamamos el buen fuego o el good fire en inglés. Eso tiene que ver con prácticas como las quemas prescritas que se llevan de una manera controlada en diferentes ecosistemas y siguiendo diferentes prácticas dependiendo del contexto. Esto es lo que llamamos la gestión forestal. La gestión forestal incluye prácticas como las quemas prescritas, que son quemas controladas, pero también otro tipo de prácticas como controlar los combustibles de maneras físicas, trayendo las cargas de flora, reduciéndolas y reestructurando el bosque. Esto se lleva a cabo para que si se reestructura el bosque, ya sea quemándolo o cortando ciertas plantas, cambiando su estructura. Si hacemos eso, el objetivo no es que no existan incendios. Sin embargo, el objetivo es que si existe un incendio, este incendio se desarrolle de una manera con menos intensidad y que sea un menos peligro, especialmente para poblaciones humanas y también para las diferentes poblaciones animales. Entonces aquí encontramos una muy interesante oportunidad para llevar a cabo alianzas internacionales. Y esto es porque muchos de los retos que tienen que ver con el fuego y también sobre la gestión forestal son compartidas a través de las fronteras, porque muchos ecosistemas y tipos de clima son compartidos a través de las fronteras, especialmente en nuestro continente, donde, por ejemplo, en Estados Unidos y México existen varios retos y varios patrones muy comunes en gran parte por la geografía compartida en estos dos países. Y este es solo un ejemplo. Entonces, esto crea una gran oportunidad para colaboraciones binacionales que nos ayuden a poder avanzar la ciencia básica, pero también proveer soluciones prácticas, las cuales pueden ser llevadas a cabo no tan solo por académicos, pero también miembros de la comunidad y diferentes agencias gubernamentales. Entonces ahí es donde llega nuestro proyecto de Alianza MX, que es el programa Alianza MX es un programa de la Universidad de California, el cual provee fondos a académicos que llevan a cabo alianzas a través de la Universidad de California con otras universidades, pero también con grupos y académicos y agencias gubernamentales en México. Y este año estaremos llevando a cabo el proyecto del cual les hablaré en la siguiente diapositiva. Entonces, nuestro proyecto, el cual yo lidero la parte de UC Davis, pero también tenemos colaboradores en UCLA y en el Colegio de la Frontera Sur en México y varias agencias gubernamentales. El objetivo general de nuestro programa es poder caracterizar los combustibles, o sea, la flora que se puede quemar en esta área, y poder llevar a cabo modelaciones y quemas prescritas para entender cómo se queman esos combustibles. Y de la región de la que estoy hablando es de la meseta comiteca en Chiapas, la cual está en la frontera con Guatemala de México. Entonces es uno de los estados que está al sur de México, a frontera con el país vecino. Entonces, nosotros encontramos esta oportunidad de trabajar tanto con las agencias gubernamentales ahí que manejan los bosques y también con comunidades que llevan a cabo prácticas tradicionales del uso del fuego. Y parte de nuestro objetivo es no simplemente traer nuevas tecnologías y también explorar desde un punto de vista científico cuáles son los combustibles que existen en el área con nuestros colaboradores ahí en México, pero también aprender de las comunidades indígenas, cómo ellos han llevado a cabo las quemas prescritas y las quemas controladas de una manera cultural a través de los años y cómo podemos colaborar con estas comunidades. Y con esto les agradezco su tiempo y espero poder presentar resultados de este proyecto que estamos ya por empezar muy pronto. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kobian, and thank you to all for presenting and coming in to Cartagena virtually from California. And we wanted to open it up for some questions, some conversation. I'm going to pass the table back over to Dr. Carr to lead us in this section of questions, and all of the panelists can be part of it and can have Q&A.
So you've heard 4 U.S. Western-based folks talk at you for about an hour and a half or so. So we would love to get some perspective, I think, about what resonated, but also what pushback, what challenges, what opportunities would you like to maybe offer back to us for consideration especially as we go and continue to try to think about what alliances look like with universities, institutions, nonprofits, industry across the Americas. So I open it up to the floor to see if there are any thoughts from you all that are here in the room or any of our friends that are online. And don't be shy. I am a professor, so I will start calling on people from the back of the room first.
Bueno, lo voy a hablar en español, pero quería saber de la audiencia si sus pensamientos sobre la ética o cultura o impacto de pólizas o los marcos teóricos que ustedes escucharon. ¿Hay algo que resonó con ustedes? ¿Qué les llamó la atención? Sí. Sí. Una pregunta, ¿cuántos de aquí son estudiantes? Alza la mano. Ok. Le voy a preguntar a los estudiantes, ¿cómo ustedes ven su futuro en el futuro de AI? ¿Quién quiere contestar? Bueno, veo al chico, sí. Sí, ¿me puedes, por favor, decir tu nombre, institución que estás estudiando?
Bueno, un gusto a todos. Mi nombre es Ronald Martínez, soy de la Universidad Simón Bolívar de Barranquilla. Y bueno, con respecto a, bueno, estoy estudiando ingeniería de sistemas. Estoy en quinto semestre. Respecto a mi futuro y lo que han hablado aquí en la charla sobre la ética y el uso de la IA, siento que mi futuro y creo que el futuro de todos los que aquí somos estudiantes y que en un futuro vamos a ser futuros profesionales, creo que la IA va a ser muy importante, pero más importante es saber usarla y saber darle un uso ético, pero unirlas con nuestra labor, ya sea la tarea que hagamos o el trabajo que vayamos a emplear. Y bueno, creo que en mi futuro y con el reto que ustedes están llevando, las soluciones y las investigaciones que en conjunto todos vamos a intentar solucionar, creo que el futuro de todos se puede ver más claro y más aún si trabajamos juntos.
Un gusto también. Me llamo John Jaraba. También soy estudiante de la Universidad Simón Bolívar. A diferencia del estudio de ingeniería civil, no de sistemas, y también estoy en quinto semestre. Me gustaría pues agregar a su información, pues pienso que sí, la IA es importante, pero hay que saber usarla y principalmente estas investigaciones que todos estos ingenieros están usando, todas las personas que están aportando conocimiento a estas nuevas tecnologías, nos van a servir más adelante porque son muy aplicables. Siempre va a haber como un campo en el que podemos profundizar, siempre va a haber como un espacio en el que se puede sacar mucha más información, mucho más conocimiento y eso por lo menos va como que cubriendo ciertos espacios y cumpliendo con ciertos factores que a veces no se toman en cuenta. Por ejemplo, la investigación de lo de los incendios en California es algo que se está dando bastante. Entonces, realizar investigaciones a fondo sobre esto ya va a cubrir un campo de información más grande para futuras investigaciones. Y con la IA, pues esto va a ser bastante fácil o más accesible, más eficiente al momento de consultar la información. Muchas gracias.
No, muchas gracias.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Samuel Morales, también soy de la Universidad Simón Bolívar de Barranquilla. Yo soy del programa de Ingeniería Biomédica en noveno semestre y el futuro de mi carrera, con la inteligencia artificial veo que ayudará a facilitar un poco las cosas en el ámbito, por ejemplo, del procesamiento de las bioseñales, ya en el análisis de imágenes biomédicas. como ya pasa actualmente. Y sería muy...
¿Lo puede decir en inglés o español? No importa.
Esto, con la inteligencia artificial, todo sería mejor, más fácil de analizar, más fácil de aprender como uno como estudiante. También, en mi caso de mi carrera, los pacientes y ya.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Hasley Guerrero. También soy estudiante de Ingeniería Biomédica de la Universidad Simón Bolívar. Actualmente estoy cursando 9º semestre. Bueno, voy para 10º. Y complementando con lo que han dicho mis compañeros, la verdad es que el uso de la inteligencia artificial hoy en día es algo importante y para todo el ámbito, o sea, para todas las personas nos ayuda a optimizar como el trabajo, por así decirlo. Y siento que esto es una herramienta fundamental por el hecho de que se pueden desarrollar más investigaciones o se puede trabajar eficientemente. Ya, hoy en día, algo que estaban hablando era sobre que habían personas que se oponían mucho a eso, ya como que al no usar inteligencia artificial o a no, yo prefiero hacer las cosas por mí mismo. O sea, eso está bien y que aunque también es un tema de debate y también es importante el hecho de usarlo éticamente correcto, en la parte de mi carrera o en mi ámbito profesional, la verdad es que la inteligencia artificial puede ayudar a un desarrollo en lo que estaba diciendo mi compañero, en lo que es el procesamiento de imágenes diagnósticas. Otra cosa muy importante, por ejemplo, hoy en día nuestro objetivo siempre va a ser poder mejorar la calidad de la vida de las personas a través de la tecnología. Entonces, teniendo esa premisa o teniendo esa afirmación, nosotros nos basamos o buscamos poder tener como un monitoreo continuo o poder tener como ciertos análisis o tendencias de la salud de la gente. Y obviamente a partir de eso la inteligencia artificial nos puede como brindar esa puerta de poder tener cierta cantidad de datos o tener, sí, por así decirlo, cierta cantidad de datos para poder desarrollar dispositivos que que te puedan dar un análisis preventivo de la salud de las personas o puedan dar un tratamiento o un diagnóstico hacia cualquier patología que pueda presentar alguien.
Muchas gracias. El último, porque voy a resumir en inglés para que los panelistas puedan.
Listo. Buenos días, mi nombre es Julio Mario Borja Vargas, estudiante también de la Universidad Simón Bolívar, 7º semestre de la Facultad de Ingeniería Mecánica. Pero lo que primordialmente veo con respecto al tema de la inteligencia artificial y las carreras tanto en ingeniería como en el resto, es que es una de las herramientas más importantes que tenemos hoy en día, puesto que no solamente nos facilita el procesamiento de datos, sino el analizar las situaciones de una forma un poco más objetiva y viendo aquellas cosas que el ojo humano no puede ver, pero a su vez genera la desventaja de, en una palabra no tan formal, flojera, puesto que las personas se confían continuamente a que la inteligencia artificial les haga el trabajo y dejan de lado el realmente trabajar con la herramienta y solamente ponen a trabajar a la herramienta. Entonces es como si solamente se dejaran en una mesa los martillos y el clavo y esperaran que el trabajo ya estuviera hecho. Se necesita una persona de por medio que comprenda esos datos que se le entrega a la inteligencia artificial y aquellos datos que también te va a entregar la inteligencia artificial. Porque nada se va a lograr si no se entiende lo que se está haciendo y dejan que una máquina haga todo. Porque yo con los datos que me da, ya yo puedo comprender si, en un ejemplo de mi carrera, si no sé, un oleoducto está presentando pitting, un error en la soldadura, corrosión de algún tipo. Entonces, la inteligencia artificial puede decir, puede ser esto, pero la experiencia y el conocimiento junto a los datos que dé la herramienta van a dar un diagnóstico mucho más preciso. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, bien dicho. Lo voy a traducir brevemente en inglés para los panelistas. I'm just going to summarize very briefly. So we had 5 different students at different stages of engineering, different disciplines. all of them agree that AI in general is a useful tool for predictive capabilities, abilities to collect data, and really paint a landscape that could support humans and in society in different ways. But there was also an acknowledgement that AI on its own and the over-reliance of AI is a dangerous area to be in. It's equivalent to having a hammer and some nails put on a table, but without the human in the center of it hammering that nail, the job and the task won't be completed. So there is an importance to have a human in the center of that AI loop. I'm just curious to hear from your thoughts as you communicate with the students and the other individuals in the audience.
Yeah, I think that actually kind of goes back to one of the points I made around students being the voice behind some of the changes that are taking place, and deciding what decisions will be made around the use of technology, starting on your campuses, the campuses having a voice with industry and policymakers. Because at the end of the day, the decisions that are going to be made by our global leaders is going to impact your generation the most. I mean, other generations as well, but I think that basically I agree. And I think before we get to these scary moments where you have the hammer and the nails and we don't know what's going on, we don't have a voice in the human being involved in that or not, let's get ahead of this as much as we can and make sure we have a voice. And I think that the young generation has the ability to do that. You're doing it with climate change. You're doing it with some of the other areas. We need to do the same thing with AI. I think what I would quickly offer to that is that I like the analogy of like the hammer and the nails, but I also think it's the concept of what do you get to do with the hammer and the nail? Because immediately you might just think, oh, I'm going to build a house with it, right? It's like AI does not have the creativity that we as humans bring to it. And so that aspect is so important because sure, it was like, I can say, yes, I want to build this thing, but it can't capture the uniqueness of the human mind. If I say, oh, I need to build this, but I'm also thinking about building it for my sister who has a disability, right? Is like, and so I need to make it accessible to them, but I also need to make it accessible to my mother who's exceptionally short, but like all of the different components that come in, we can build those things in because it's like we're able to think from a multi-frame perspective as humans and imagine what is not imagined, right? AI is only able to put out what has already been said or discovered, but we are the discoverers, right? It's like we are the people who kind of continue to bring things forward. And it also is so important because AI is limited in its, what I'll say is its prejudice, right? Which is that it has largely only framed Western, American, European perspectives. And so it's like your voice gets lost in it. So the AI continues to regurgitate the things that have been continuously raised up. And as Dr. Fletcher noted earlier, it continues to perpetuate inequities of the have and the have-nots, because if your story isn't told because you aren't telling it, then you aren't in the narrative. You're not a part of the conversation, which literally means that you don't get to be a part of the future. And we absolutely need you all to be a part of the future.
Tenemos un estudiante que quiere hacer su aporte en inglés y un estudiante que tiene una pregunta.
Sí, gracias.
Ok, vamos primero con el estudiante con su aporte.
Hello, bueno, lo voy a decir en inglés, pero es más de lo que dijo últimamente el último ponente. Hello, I'm a multimedia student and I'm currently studying in my sixth semester, multimedia engineer. I believe that the use of AI is very important for us and future professionals. I think that how we use it and managing it will define our sources. AI is not going to leave off and play it. But if we don't know how to use it, it will be self-destructive. We have to use with an awareness and critical thinking and reason creatively, because it will never to able to replace human thought. Thank you.
Well, well, well said. I wanted to bring a perspective, and if I may, just for 30 seconds or so, from a personal standpoint. I am a mother of 2 children, and my 2 children are in middle school and in high school at the moment. Those 2 children have been born in the generation of internet, has been born in the generation of TikTok. Now they're going to grow up in the generation of AI. The next generation of children that are going to be born will only know AI for their entire lives. This group that's right here online and in person have seen the transitions and know the implications. Our future children will not. So it is both our ethical and moral responsibility to help that generation that's going to be born in AI to understand those risks, those benefits, what's right and what's wrong. So I really want you to all think about that, right? Because you, at this moment in time in history, have an important role, both professionally and societally.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. We really appreciate your time and your preparation. Thanks to everyone who came online. Thank you to everyone who flew down to Cartagena to visit and to be here in person. And thank you to all of you in the audience who stayed with us through this conversation. My husband and I have to go to the airport, as does Lena. So we're going to move quickly and catch our flight to leave. But thank you to all and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a nuestros panelistas. Gracias a nuestros panelistas que también se conectaron con nosotros. De verdad, mil gracias. Ha sido un gusto y un gran placer poderles tener aquí y recibirlos en esta universidad, Universidad Tecnológica de Bolívar, desde Cartagena para el mundo entero. Por favor, un fuerte aplauso a nuestros panelistas. Y bueno, ¿cuántos desean que ya sea otra vez el próximo año y tenerlos de vuelta? ¿Cuántos lo desean? Ya, queremos que regresen pronto. Ellos ya tienen que partir, entonces los despedimos. Y para ustedes llegó la hora feliz, que es la hora del almuerzo. Muy bien. Entonces ya nos están esperando para almorzar, el mismo lugar de ayer, edificio MB, piso número 3. Puedes acceder en la cafetería, hacia tu derecha por las escaleras, hacia la izquierda puedes tomar el ascensor. Provecho en su almuerzo. Mil gracias, qué honor haberle conocido a cada uno de ustedes. De verdad que sí. Y qué dicha poder haber compartido aquí con ustedes.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Para poderme comunicar mejor. Porque es necesario. Ay, muchas gracias. Qué linda, qué hermosa. Muchas gracias. Estoy aprendiendo.
Make you look skinny, David. Like, it's gonna